Hey guys, Josh Henkin here, creator of the Ultimate Sandbag and the Lift Certification. You know, the last couple of weeks I've been able to introduce some phenomenal coaches, and I'm really psyched about the guy I have today because I've known him probably for the longest, almost 15 years. And I just have a tremendous amount of respect for Keats Snideman. Keats I met at a strength conditioning seminar almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's few guys that I know that have the insight into both the practical application and the science of training that Keats does. Besides being highly educated, he's been an athlete himself, so it's great that he's able to bridge the gap between science and practical application. So Keith, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, Josh.
One thing I really dragged Keats into doing, because part of the lift certification I want to do is give practical means for people doing important things like assessments, because I think we've gone into a weird era in our industry. When Keats and I started, we hit right at that point where assessments were becoming really big in mainstream fitness. So Keats, I wanted to ask you, as someone who has a background in corrective exercise, soft tissue work, and strength conditioning, what are your thoughts? There's two big schools of thought with assessment. There's one that goes, if you train hard and you do the right type of exercise, things will just work themselves out.
Right.
And there's the other that's almost what we sort of laugh about, the paralysis by analysis. We're going to find so many problems in you, you're so scared to train.
Exactly, and that's really one of the big problems is people are either going to do no assessment because it's definitely a area where people feel very unconfident, because let's just face it, most trainers aren't necessarily going into this industry with a big background in like kinesiology and anatomy. I mean, you just learn enough to kind of get by, and so most people are very exercise oriented and they want to smoke their clients, and that's good, that's what the clients want, but we also don't want to injure the clients. And then, like you mentioned, on the other side we've got the physical therapy realm, which has really probably it was in the late 90s maybe when this really started, and it's definitely making a resurgence, though I think it's definitely better the second go around, as people are starting to realize that just because someone has some physical limitations, which you could find through an assessment. Now, as trainers, we're not diagnosing, we are not doctors, we are not necessarily rehabbing people. We are trying to prevent injury, we're trying to deal with stiffness, mobility issues. If someone has a problem, we probably want to be working with a chiropractor, a physical therapist, an MD, somebody who has the proper training to guide that process. But there's so many people that just are going to trainers and they're just getting thrown into these incredible workouts and boot camps, and that's a little scary because there's no screening, there's no even minimal assessment to see if these people are competent, and just basic movement patterns to see if they can just connect the dots, to see if they just have basic fundamental body awareness to do a good squatting pattern, a good lunging pattern, a good bending, or like a deadlift pattern, or even like a push-up pattern.
And I think you're going to talk more about those patterns in a moment.
Yeah.
You and I were talking a little bit earlier about how trainers have become fixated both on exercises and implements.
Yes.
If you could talk just briefly how that influences basically how you structure a program, because we were talking about just the eyes that you see people with.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's face it, it's fun to have more tools, it's fun to have options. Obviously, you have created the Ultimate Sandbag, which some people think that you're just really about a sandbag. You've done kettlebell training, some people think, well, and maybe he's just about kettlebell. It's not really about the implement. It's really about what you do with that specific implement and what is the training effect. So if you really know what you're doing as a trainer, you'll use the implement intelligently to get the training effect that you're looking for. And obviously clients want to have some fun. We don't want it to all be boring, which is definitely why we've gravitated away from the machines, because the machines get a little monotonous. You never really get to vary that range of motion. But it's not so much, it's not just about the implement. You can do the exercises with multiple implements, and it really just depends on who you're working with. Are you working one-on-one? Are you working with a small group? What's the best implement that you have for that specific situation and for their goals?
Because really it's about achieving those movements. We were talking about an old idea we got from Paul Chek years ago, which was the primal movements, and
exactly.
We're sort of seeing evolution in
Yes.
their own ways of that. A lot of people too, when they go there, because the industry is going to small group and group-based training,
right,
they feel like I can't do an assessment. Are there simple things, like if you had 3 to 4 things that people could do as a coach to just quickly screen people, have an idea of what they may need to be aware of? Well, what are those type of things that you may be looking for?
All right, well, I did kind of just mention like the squatting pattern. I mean, whether we like it or not, or whether somebody says, I don't like to squat, you have to squat just getting on and off a toilet, in and out of your car. That is a squatting pattern. just having an idea if someone can do an unweighted squat. It could be an overhead squat. It could just be a body weight squat. But doing a fundamental pattern like the squat and just observing. All you need to see is a few reps. You don't necessarily need to have them do a whole workout to get an idea. We just want to capture what does that person put together for that pattern. And squatting and I would say deadlifting or bending would be the second, because those are the two most common patterns that we're doing either well or horribly all day long. So that, and then we can talk about single leg stance as well.
Okay, so in a moment, Keats is actually going to give you 4 drills that you can look at, why they're important as a coach, just to do a basic screening. These are not necessarily, you have to only do these, but we want to give you a baseline of things you can do so that you can start being more aware of what your clients are doing, so you can start prescribing and creating the right program.
Exactly.
So we'll get into those in just one moment.